Ladies and gentlemen, dame i gospodo, nekad se govorilo drugovi i drugarice. Drago mi je što vas vidim u toliko broju. Najprije bih pozdravio one koji još nisu zaboravili stari jezik ili koji su ga čak naučili. So those were good wishes for people who haven't forgotten the language or even have learned it. I'm a linguist, which means I analyze languages, and I also teach them and I translate them. I can explain to people how it is possible to have 3 or 4 languages within one big language. And I can tell you that Bosnian and its neighboring languages are an interesting case study for all linguists. One characteristic of it, among many, is that it has 2 kinds of words. One kind of word can come anywhere in a sentence, at the beginning of the sentence, or in the middle, or at the end. But the other kind has special rules. We can say drago mi je, meaning I'm glad. But we couldn't say mi je drago, or je drago mi, or any other order of words. I'm from Ithaca, which is a small city in the middle of the state of New York. It's halfway between New York City and the famous waterfalls on the Canadian border, Niagara Falls. By the way, it's not Utica. There's a much bigger group of Bosnians in Utica, just a few Bosnians and Bosnophiles in Ithaca. But Ithaca has a large university named Cornell University, where I worked, and a small university called Ithaca College. My wife, Teresa Alt, and I were part of the Bosnian student project in Ithaca. And one of the students stayed at our house for a while. My wife can also speak, well, not Bosnian, but let's say very Zagreb-sounding Croatian, because she was with me in Zagreb when I worked there. Since I was called professor, I was also able to make official written translations of documents from Bosnian to English. And this was sometimes important for the students and much more important for refugees that came to Ithaca at the same time in the 1990s. I can go to a notary public and swear that this is an accurate translation, and the notary puts their seal on and the government accepts it. But I want to move the spotlight away from me. First of all, the spotlight should be on the students themselves, and on Doug Hostetter and Tosun Barak, who first got the idea of helping young Bosnians to finish their studies here in the United States. But when we talk about Ithaca, the spotlight should really be on Harvey Fireside and Bryna Fireside. Harvey Fireside was professor of politics at Ithaca College. He himself chose that title. We often say professor of political science, but he insisted that politics is not a science. He was very interested in human rights, and specifically in the way that human rights were denied to people in the Soviet Union and its allied countries. And he had a personal interest in the problems of refugees, because he was born in Vienna, Austria, and his family was Jewish, so they had to leave very quickly when the German Nazis took over Austria in 1938. Harvey's wife, Bryna Fireside, was a writer and had a special gift for writing non-fiction books for children and young people. She wrote about famous legal cases and conflicts and explained about human rights and violations of rights. The 2 of them together were really effective organizers. They established the Ithaca local group of the big human rights organization, Amnesty International, in 1972, 1973. And That was just before I came to Ithaca, and I joined the group when I heard about it. It's still there, we're still there, still working for human rights. The two of them started a group called the Border Fund to help people who came to the southern border of the United States, trying to get the status of refugees. Later, Harvey and Brenna Fireside started what they named the Eleanor Roosevelt Fund to lend money for temporary support to refugees and other foreign citizens in Ithaca. Maybe you know, you may be hit with, as a foreigner coming to this country, you may be hit with unexpected claims like $555 for visa support or something. And when Harvey and Brenna heard about the Bosnian Student Project from Doug Hofstadter, they started the Ithaca branch of that. As you all know, it was possible for young Bosnians to get student visas to come to the United States if they had a promise of full financial support from some school, college, or university in this country. Harvey Fireside organized a number of Ithaca residents and turned to his own university, Ithaca College. They got some promises for the future. Some of us Ithacans went to speak to Cornell University. We got some expressions of interest, but rather vague. Then we went to a third institution called Tompkins Cortland Community College. That's not a complete university, but you can study there for 2 years, and then you have a good chance of transferring to a bigger university, like Cornell or like Ithaca College. The president of the community college was Eduardo Marti. Eduardo Marti promised to support several students instantaneously. He said, "I was a refugee from Cuba. I know what it means." And in fact, 3 students did start studying at the community college and later became students at either Cornell University or Ithaca College, because by that time, Cornell and Ithaca College had finally agreed to give them scholarship money. Samir Kolenovic, who we heard about, studied at Cornell, and so did one of the Bordatovich sisters, while the other got her degree in chemistry at Ithaca College. We, that is my wife and I, can say we're especially grateful to Samir because he now works as Senior Technical Advisor for Housing and Urban Development at the Council of Europe Development Bank in Paris. And when my wife needed information about housing policy of governments in European countries, he was able to explain this to her in great detail. This was reminiscent of the favorite quotation from the Bible: "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days." That means help people, and unexpectedly, people will help you. It was one of Harvey Fireside's observations in life that you cannot simply decide to make friends with somebody of a different religion or a different race or a different nationality. But if you and they can work on some concrete project side by side, then friendship comes as a side effect. This rather resonates with something that Doug had been telling us, because Doug, like Harvey, has the gift of joining diverse people into shared projects. Unfortunately, Harvey is no longer with us. He died in 2008, Raina Fireside is now in Baltimore, Maryland, where one of her sons lives. She is not in good health from what we hear. Our Bosnian students were warmly received by the public in Ithaca. This was partly due to the intelligence and accomplishments of the students themselves, and partly due to what the Ithacans learned about Bosnia and Bosnians from reading the newspapers and watching television during the war. But here I should shine the spotlight on another Ithaca professor, John Wayles of the History Department at Cornell University. He didn't work in the Bosnian Student Project especially, but as a historian of wars, he studied genocides and talked about them, studied crimes against civilians, and he didn't only study them, he was an activist and did his best to work against them. He had a gift for attracting the attention of the public. He heard that the city of Bihać was surrounded and didn't have medical supplies. And so he organized parades in Ithaca, and concerts in Ithaca, and ceremonies, and collected money to buy an ambulance, all that you can call it, and loaded it up with bandages and medicines, and got a real daredevil driver to drive it into Bihać through the enemy lines. A side effect of John Weiss's activism was that Ithacans became much more familiar with Bosnia and Bosnians than they had ever been before. After the war in Bosnia was over, John Weiss gave lectures in several cities in Bosnia with me as translator. And he worked with some students in Tuzla. He shared with them one of his observations that came from studying World War II in France. Look very carefully at statements that governments make after a war. Governments always have a tendency to slant or frisera the truth for their own purposes. And he called a group of students that he organized the Ghostbusters, because he trained them to look carefully at statements and see what was behind them. So coming back to a personal view for me, over the years and decades, people in the then Yugoslavia, in Bosnia and around Bosnia, always received me warmly and helped me gain knowledge and skills in their languages. So I considered that it was my duty to use this knowledge and these skills for the benefit of these same people. Besides the Bosnian Student Project and work with refugees in Ithaca, I do translations for the website Spirit of Bosnia, Duh Bosne, which you can find at www.spiritofbosnia.org. I've been working with two Bosnian poets, Sasha Skenderia and Adin Ljutsa, translating their works into English and helping the publishing house named Samizdat that Adin Ljutsa runs, www.samizdat.nu. I've brought some books published by Samizdat for the library at the center, and I'd be delighted to tell you much more about it. Thank you for your attention. Hvala na pažnji.